Hi Bookish Besties, my name is Brittany. This is Rescues and Reads. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're already subscribed, as always, I appreciate your continued support. Thank you for returning to another video. Today we are here to talk about book series. We are going to talk about all of the series that I had ongoing at the start of 2024 and where they currently stand at the end of 2024. So if you have been with my channel for the past couple of years, you will know that a big goal of mine outside of trying to curb my book buying and whittle down my physical TBR was also to try to whittle down my in-progress series. So I have been working diligently, especially last year. I think last year was the biggest one, to get the number of series I have in progress down to a manageable level. So today we are going to talk about series, and I'm going to break it up into categories. We are going to talk about all of the series that I completed in 2024. So these are series that to my knowledge are done. There are going to be no books in the series, and I have read all of the books in this series. We are going to talk about series that I have caught up in. So the series is ongoing, but I have read all of the currently published books. We are going to talk about the series that I have DNF'd, so series that I am not going to be continuing with going forward. We are going to talk about the series that I made progress in, so I didn't complete them and I didn't catch up in them, but I did make progress in them. And then of course we are going to talk about the series that I started in 2024. So let's go ahead and get the bad news out of the way. Let's go ahead and talk about the series that I have decided to stop reading going forward. So the first series that I made the executive decision to DNF was the Stephanie Plum series by Janet Ivanovich. That was a series that I was determined to continue because I had already gotten so far. I think I had read up to book 15 or 16 by the point that I decided to DNF it, but yet even still, I was 15 to 16 books behind. So it would have taken an immense amount of time for me to catch up in the series. And unfortunately, while I find those to be very enjoyable, quick, fast, fun reads, they're nothing memorable and they all run together. They are all kind of the same. And while I absolutely love all of the characters and I have enjoyed them, I just don't think that I have the time to dedicate to the series because I want to go into books knowing that I'm going to absolutely love them and they're going to be my favorite thing ever. And I just know that's not the case with Stephanie Plum. So I did unfortunately make the decision to DNF that series, and I have since unhauled all of my Stephanie Plum novels because I don't feel the need to keep part of a series on my shelves. Now I have a couple of series on here that I know is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. The first is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Robin Hobb is a booktube darling. Everybody loves Robin Hobb. She's considered a queen of classic fantasy, and I really wanted to get in on that hype. I really did. And so that's why I decided to start the Farseer trilogy. So I read the first book in that trilogy and I enjoyed it for the most part, but for me, it was not something that I truly connected to or was emotionally invested in. And so I went into book 2 of the trilogy and I just didn't care. I was not excited to read it. There was nothing enticing me to pick it up, and I knew that if I tried to continue with the story, I was probably going to go into a slump, or it was just going to sit there unread for a long time because I was reading it immersively. And I just knew that there was always going to be an excuse preventing me from picking up that book. And so I just decided that it wasn't worth it. And so I just made the decision that I wasn't going to force myself to read it just because everybody loves Robin Hobb. So I did make the executive decision to DNF that trilogy. And once again, Archibald is having a tantrum outside of the door. You are probably going to be able to hear him scratch, and I am so terribly sorry about that. Another series that I have made the executive decision to DNF is the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, and there are a couple of reasons for this. The very first books that I ever read by Brandon Sanderson were the first 2 books in the first Mistborn trilogy, and that trilogy never hit like it hit with a lot of other people. Was it insanely clever and well written? Absolutely, nobody is going to deny that, but again, this is not a series that I look forward to reading. Now, I did read the first book of the Stormlight Archive series back in 2023, and I absolutely loved it, and I will certainly be continuing with that series. Mistborn never gave me those feelings. I never ended those books loving the characters, loving the world, and wanting to immediately dive back into them. And also, I've heard pretty negative things about the second era Mistborn, so for me, I don't necessarily think I want to bother with it. It does really bug me that I would have an incomplete trilogy on my shelves. It really does. So there is a possibility that one day I might get a hair up my butt and be like, you know what, I need to finish the Mistborn trilogy, and I might actually do that. But for now, this is not going to be something that I actively choose to complete. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, another series that I decided to DNF was Skyward. And there's no negative reason that I decided to DNF Skyward. It's just that I didn't feel like Skyward needed any follow-up. You know what I mean? I really enjoyed Skyward for what it was. It's a young adult science fiction. I had a fantastic time with it, and I really enjoyed Murderbot. He was one of my favorite characters from, I think it was 2023 when I read that book. So he was one of my favorite characters the year that I read that story. But once I got done with it, I I was completely satisfied with, for the most part, everything in this story. So when it came time to potentially continue the series, I just didn't want to. So I have Skyward on my shelves and I will be keeping Skyward, and I don't really feel the need to continue with it. So that is my reasoning behind that one. Another one that I decided to DNF was the Aaron Falk series by Jane Harper. That is a detective fiction series that is set in Australia, and it just never did anything for me. I was never a big fan of the dry. It didn't blow me out of the water. I read the second book in the series and I thought it was fine. And then when it came to the third book, I had it on my shelves, so I had to give it a try. But I was only a couple chapters in and I was not feeling it. I was not in the mood for it. And I just knew that this was not going to be a book that I enjoyed. And so I decided to cut my losses, and I have since unhauled that entire series. And then the final one that I DNF'd was the Savage Land series by Stacey Marie Brown. That is one that I was having a really great time with. I read the first 3 books and I really enjoyed them for the most part. It wasn't anything super amazing or mind-blowing, but they were really fast-paced. I was enjoying the plot of the story. There was always some kind of explosion and rescue attempt and things like that. So it was just kind of like a candy type of series. And then it was time for me to read the next book, and it picked up almost immediately after the end of the third book. And I remembered nothing. I had no idea where we were or what was happening, and I didn't care enough to go find out. And because of that, that told me that I wasn't interested enough in this series to continue with it. And I definitely wasn't invested enough to try to make my mind figure out exactly what was happening. So that is another one that I have DNF'd and I have unhauled. Now let's go ahead and talk about all the series that I completed in 2024, because there are a lot of them. So first I have the Collector series by Dot Hutchinson. This is a quartet. There are 4 books in this series, and it's one that I have really enjoyed. In fact, I have enjoyed probably every other book more and more as I've gotten through this series. I finished the 4th book this year, and it was one of my favorites of the series. I thought it was a great end to the series overall, and I'm so glad that I was able to complete it. I also completed Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Finally, I read Kingdom of Ash earlier this year. It was quite an intense reading experience. I remember being almost in tears for like the last 300 pages of the story because I had no idea what was going to happen to my babies, and they were all separated. And so it was that really tense moment of trying to wait for them all to reunite finally after so long apart. And I thought it was phenomenal. It was definitely slow. You know, you really have to build up to that last couple hundred pages when everything is going down, but I loved it. I thought it was an amazing end to the series. I'm sad that it's done, but I'm gonna hold out hope that we will see those characters again. I also finished the Bromance Book Club series by Alyssa K. Adams. I read the last 2 books that I needed to this year. That overall was just a cute, sweet romance series. I wouldn't say that the books were anything of substance, and I don't necessarily know if today, had I picked up the first book, if it would have been something that I continued. But since I did originally start reading it a few years ago when my tastes were a little bit different, and for the most part I had a really good time with those books, I decided to go ahead and continue, and I did finish it this year. I also finished the It Ends With Us duology with It Starts With Us. Did Colleen Hoover need to publish It Starts With Us? No, but I thought that it was a very satisfying book, so I was really glad we got that conclusion, and I actually enjoyed it more than I enjoyed It Ends With Us. I also finished the original True North series by Serena Bowen. That is another romance series that I have really enjoyed. Again, it's not a romance series that I think I would have completed had I picked up like the first book this year, but for the most part, I really loved how interconnected all of the books were. I loved that you saw all of the other characters throughout the stories. You knew exactly who they were and what their history was and all of that stuff. I enjoyed the relationships that were in there and everything, so I'm very glad that I was able to complete that series as well. I also finished the Friend Zone series by Abby Jimenez. That is a trilogy of companion novels. Unfortunately, the last book was quite a disappointment for me, but that's okay. I have all of them on my shelves. I will continue to read everything that Abby Jimenez writes going forward because I still do trust her. It's just there were a lot of technical issues that I had with that book, and so unfortunately it ended up letting me down. Similarly, I finished the Simple Wild series by K.A. Tucker with Running Wild. To my knowledge, there are going to be no more books coming out in that series, but if there are, I would definitely read some, even though this last one didn't necessarily lead up to my expectations. That was another disappointment, but I did finish it. I also recently finished the Burying Water series by K.A. Tucker. That was another quartet, this time of romantic suspense, and I really did enjoy my time with that series, and the 4th book I think was one of my favorites, so glad to have gotten that one done as well. I also finally finished the Grant County series by Karen Slaughter. That one definitely ended with a bang. I have read, I would say, the vast majority of Karen Slaughter releases. For the most part, all I have left now is the Will Trent series, and I know characters from Grant County are going to soon start showing up in the Will Trent series, and I'm looking forward to seeing the aftermath of what happened in the final book in the Grant County series in the context of the Will Trent series. So I'm happy to have finished that one. I did also, of course, finish the Alphabet Murder series by Sue Grafton. We all know by now that Sue Grafton passed away back in 2017, and so her last published novel was Why Is For Yesterday, A. There will be no Z. The series will never officially be completed, but I did complete all of the books that have been released and will ever be released in that series. I did also complete the Housemaid series by Freida McFadden. Now I know a new novella has been released about the housemaid's wedding, which is meant to bridge the gap between book 2 and book 3. I don't necessarily feel the need to read that book. You definitely don't need to read that book, obviously, in order to understand the series because it was published after the 3rd book in the series. So I may pick it up one of these days if I need a quick novella, especially to see like what happened with Millie and Enzo during the times between book 2 and book 3. But I do consider the series completed and I have completed it. I also finished the Dogwood County trilogy by Alicia Whistler. This is a series that literally nobody knows about, nobody talks about. It is a series of contemporary romances that also feature heavily animals and animal rescue, and it is because of that reason why I really enjoyed them. I also really enjoyed them for the fact that a lot of the characters in this are older. They're like in their early to late 30s, maybe even in their 40s, and I appreciated that representation. The writing in the series is not the best. It is very, very basic, even a little bit clunky, I would say at times, and it's nothing super overwhelmingly special, but for the most part, I had a decent time with the series, and it is completed. And then the final one that I have here is just the duology from Lisa Jewell, The Family Upstairs and The Family Remains. Oddly enough, I enjoyed The Family Remains more than The Family Upstairs. So if you read The Family Upstairs and didn't necessarily love it, I would recommend The Family Remains because I do think it was better overall. All right, now let's quickly go through all of the series that I caught up in. So the first is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I don't know if she plans on releasing anything more in this world. She has a new release that is coming out next year, and offhand, I don't know if it is set in the same universe as Part of Your World. So as of right now, I'm considering the series in progress, but I have caught up with all of the releases. But if you have more insider knowledge, please leave that down below. I did finally catch up with the A Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J Maas because I read A Court of Silver Flames, which is the last book that was released in this series. So I am now officially caught up in that one. And I also did catch up in the Dr. Alex Carter series by Alice Henderson. Y'all know how much I really enjoy that series. It follows a wildlife biologist who is on a mission to save animals, basically. And so in every single book, she is on a new mission. She is following a different kind of animal, and you're learning all about that animal within the book, but you're also learning a lot about climate change and what's affecting these animals and what we can do to help them. And I find that they're usually pretty high stakes too. They will usually get your heart pumping. And she has a new book in this series coming out in 2025, which I'm very excited about. But for now, I am caught up in the series. And similarly, I did catch up in the Unsub series by Meg Gardner. That is another detective fiction series. I thought it was going to be done with this last book that I read, which was book number 4, I believe, but it definitely didn't because there is still a storyline that is unresolved from the first couple of books. So I'm pretty sure that we are going to see at least one more book in this series. Now let's just go ahead and talk about the couple of series in 2024 that I just made progress in. I didn't catch up in or complete, but I did make progress in the series. There's only a couple of them here. I have the Defy the Night series by Bridget Kemmerer. I believe this is only a trilogy. I could be wrong, but I finished book 2 in the series earlier this year. And I think the only other series that I have for this category is the Will Trent series by Karen Slaughter, which I read book 2 of this year. So those are the only series that I made progress in but didn't actually complete, catch up in it, or DNF. Now let's go ahead and talk about all of the series that I started in 2024, regardless of whether or not they are complete or in progress. These are series that I started for the first time in 2024 and I still need to complete. So first on here we have the Boys of Tommen series by Chloe Walsh. I have been talking about this series nonstop recently on my channel. I read the first 2 books in that series not too terribly long ago and they completely had me in a chokehold. I'm very excited to get to the next book in this series, which I do have thanks to a kind gift from Tara. Thank you so much again to Tara for sending that my way. That will definitely be continued in 2025. A recent read of mine was And There He Kept Her by Joshua Moling. This is the Ben Packard series that follows Sheriff Ben Packard in a small Minnesota town, and I had a really good time with this one. So I do believe that I will be continuing. If I read the next book in the series and it doesn't do too terribly much for me, I might reconsider, but as of right now, I am continuing. I also started the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. Now, I believe that this is a duology with a novella, and the next books that came out are set in the same world, but not the same characters. But yes, I did receive the Fairleigh special editions of this duology, and I do need to read the second book still. Hopefully, I'm able to get to that in 2025. Another series that I started in 2025 and absolutely adored was the Assistant to the Villain series by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I read the first 2 books. The third one is about to come out in 2025, and I do believe that there is going to be more for sure. I think there's going to be significantly more, but I do absolutely adore these characters so much, and I will probably read them all. I also started the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. Now, I had originally read Red Rising in 2017 when I was a very, very different reader, but Fairleigh announced they were going to be releasing new collections of Iron editions, and in order to see if I really wanted to spend all the money on the Red Rising series, I ended up rereading Red Rising. I definitely enjoyed it more this time around. However, the first book did not blow me away like it blew a lot of people away, but I did decide to continue and I read the second book in that first trilogy as well. So I do hope to get to the third book in that series in 2025. Will I continue with it after that? I don't know, but I will definitely be completing the first trilogy. Another series that I started was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I'm very late to the game on that one. I believe the first book was published like back in 2014 or something, and she's coming out with edited versions, and so that's what I read, and I really did have a good time with it. I did enjoy myself while reading it, and so I do have plans on continuing with this series. And then the last series that I started in 2024 was the Empyrean series, starting of course with Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I didn't make any other progress in that series this year. Fourth Wing was the very first fantasy that I consumed in 2024, and I didn't continue at all, but I might make Iron Flame the first fantasy book that I read in 2025, especially considering the next book is being released. I have been told that that book series is now going to be, I think, at least 5 books. Again, I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's going to depend on my experience with Iron Flame and Onyx Storm. I have pre-ordered Onyx Storm already as well, which is another reason why I really want to prioritize Iron Flame, but we're going to see if this ends up being a series that I continue with after those next 2 books. Now, in terms of the other series that I have ongoing that I made no progress in, The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, which is very unfortunate because I only have 1 book remaining, and that is Winter, and so I definitely need to make that a priority in 2025 because I have been reading this series for far too long considering it is only 4 books. The Alex Stern series by Leigh Bardugo. I haven't read Hellbent yet. I believe that there's at least 1 more book coming out in this series, so I need to read Hellbent before that next book comes out. I surprisingly didn't read a Finlay Donovan this year. I was caught up in the series up until the beginning of this year when the 4th book came out, and I didn't read it. I had plans to read it and I just didn't. And now the next book in that series is coming out, so I really need to get caught up in it, but I will be continuing with that. And then these next 2 are big epic fantasies. We have Empire of the Damned by Jay Kristoff, which is the second book in the Empire of the Vampire series. And then we also have House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. 2 very huge chunky fantasies that I just could not get to. And then the last one on here is yet even a bigger chunky fantasy series, and that is the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. I made 0 progress in that series in 2024. I'm not surprised by that. 2024 has been an absolute whirlwind, and the last half of this year has been absolute chaos. So intense and insane. And it should be slowing down for me a little bit come the end of January. So I have only about a month and a half more of this chaos, and then I could hopefully start focusing on bigger chunky fantasies again, maybe get back into my grad courses and stuff like that. But for right now, it is still very much a chaotic time, and I'm not really going to be able to dedicate my energy to any of these chunky fantasies until that slows down. All right, everybody, that is it. That is a wrap up of how I did with my series in 2024. Please comment down below and let me know how you did with your series. Did you start a lot of series? If so, which one was your favorite? Did you complete a lot of series? Essentially, how is it going with you making progress in all of the series you are currently reading? Or if you made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me a dragon emoji in honor of all the fantasies that I didn't get to in 2024. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up. Throughout the month of December, from December 1st through December 25th, I'm aiming to post 1 video every day leading up to Christmas. And if you don't want to miss any of that content or chaos, please be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos or on any of my other social media platforms, including my newly announced Patreon, all of which are going to be linked down below along with any books featured in the video, except for this video because I'm not going to be linking every single series that I talked about here. But until next time, y'all, bye.